Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast with your host, Gui Costin. The goal of this podcast is to give listeners a unique look into sales strategies from top industry executives. We introduce you to the heads of sales and heads of distribution who will help you understand the inner workings of the successful sales organizations from philosophy to execution. This podcast is essential for sales professionals seeking wisdom from the best in the field. If you're not familiar with Dakota and their Dakota Rainmaker content, please check out dakota.com to learn more about their services.
This episode is brought to you by Dakota Marketplace. Are you tired of constantly jumping between multiple databases and channels to find the right investment opportunities? Introducing Dakota Marketplace, the comprehensive institutional and intermediary database built by fundraisers for fundraisers. With Dakota Marketplace, you'll have access to all channels and asset classes in one place, saving you time and streamlining your fundraising process. Say goodbye to the frustration of searching through multiple databases, websites, Form ADVs, and say hello to a seamless and efficient fundraising experience. Sign up now and see the difference Dakota Marketplace can make for you. Visit dakota.com/Dakota-Marketplace today. What's up, everybody? It's Gui Costin, founder, CEO of Dakota. Welcome to the latest edition of the Rainmaker Podcast. I am joined by Jonathan Kingery. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you, Geets.
It's so much
honored to be here.
It's great to have you here. So Jonathan is the Senior VP and Head of U.S. Wealth Management for Franklin Templeton. So Jonathan Kingery is a Senior Vice President and Head of U.S. Wealth Management Sales for Franklin Templeton. In this role, he is responsible for leading territory sales for wires, RBI, RAA, private banks, and the internal sales desk. His team works closely with investment committees and manager research analysts across the full spectrum of Franklin Templeton's investment and research capabilities. In addition, he serves on Franklin Templeton's management committee and is a board member for Fiduciary Trust Company International, a subsidiary of Franklin Templeton. Mr. Kingery has over 20 years of experience in the financial services industry. Prior to joining Franklin Templeton Investments in 2019, he spent 14 years at Lord Abbett & Company, where he served in several roles, most recently leading the institutional RAA team. At Lord Abbett, Mr. Kingery served on the Client Services Leadership Institute, the Institutional Strategy Team, and SMA Operating Committee. Before joining Lord Abbett & Company, Mr. Kingery served as Vice President for Bisis Insurance Services and began his career in the financial services as a financial advisor and certified financial planner. In our industry, there's really not a venue where you can hear from distribution leaders that are running big businesses, that in order to run those businesses, they have to have a very clear set of principles, ways of doing things, culture. And what we're doing on these podcasts is bringing that information out so all of us in a sales and distribution role can learn what I would consider from the best. And having done now so many of these, there's such common characteristics about how you as big distribution leaders run your organization. So with that, let's kick into it. So Jonathan, could you just give us a little background on your career, family, and everything before we kick into it?
Sure, happy to. As far as my career is concerned, I think I'm a proof statement that there's not one path to take. I'm a product of educators, multi-generational educators, not coming from the financial services, coming out of college, very liberal arts education, predominantly history and physical therapy were what I studied. And then I got to my senior year, started taking finance, econ classes, went to career fairs, and I thought, where's this been? Very intrigued by it. Started at the age of 22 as a financial advisor. In the bullpen, smiling and dialing for dollars with my cohorts. And
where was that?
I started with American Express Financial Advisors, now Ameriprise in Wilmington, Delaware.
Nice.
Yes. Had some great leaders, mentors there to learn from. Was a financial advisor till age 29. But was always intrigued when the wholesalers were coming in, more the business-to-business sale than the business-to-consumer sale. So age 29 made the pivot to become a wholesaler and was very fortunate. I didn't know the job existed when I was growing up.
Right.
So what do you want to be when you grow up? I didn't know it existed and loved it. I carried the bag for north of 15 years. Had the opportunity to call on wirehouses for 10 years, banks and independents for a couple of years, RIAs. I spent time in the institutional world within consultant relations.
So let me ask you this. So someone made a comment on one of the prior podcasts is that if a recommendation is made early, he said, go retail. And the reason he said, retail or intermediary, if you want to call it, is because of the reps that you get. Can you talk a little about that? Because clearly you got in the reps.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a contact sport. And so the more you can fail fast, fail often, fail better, you just get better at it. So you have to put yourself out there, and having 10, 12 meetings a day in, day out,
right,
you're going to get better.
Right.
And so it's very true. And the sales cycle is a little bit quicker than the institutional side, and you get more reps. So clearly you get a chance to polish yourself a little bit more.
Gotcha. So I know you told me you live in New Jersey, married.
Correct. Married, 18-year anniversary coming up.
Congrats.
16-year-old daughter. Thank you.
That's great.
14-year-old son, 11th grade and 9th grade.
Nice. So walk me through, have you, with intent, set up the sort of the divisions just walk me through how you're structured to be able to operate that kind of a large organization?
Sure. Well, it starts with leadership, and we did make some changes where our divisional sales managers, our divisional sales leaders are cross-channel, with the exception of RIA. So whether they're a wirehouse, regional bank, independent firm, our divisional sales leaders oversee the wholesalers there.
So they would be generalists covering the independents and the wires in the territories?
So when we get to the territories, we're channelized in the major metropolitan areas.
Makes sense. Gotcha.
We're de-channelized in the secondary cities. It's really about advisor density. So if you're in New York City, you need several wholesalers in New York City.
Right.
So it makes sense to have a dedicated wirehouse, a dedicated regional bank independent wholesaler. When you get to Albuquerque, New Mexico, one person, it's better suited to cover everyone there because they're going to have more time with advisors,
right,
and less time on planes and automobiles.
Right.
So it's really about the density so that we can spend as much time with clients as possible.
Makes total sense. Okay. Let's talk about one of my favorite topics is communication.
Yeah.
So walk me through, now you have a large organization, but let's talk communication in two different ways. One, how do you communicate with your team on a weekly basis around, progress, sales check-ins, and how are they set up? And do you let them all do it on their own, or do you have a structure you want them to follow?
We definitely have a structure we want to follow. And for a larger organization, it's imperative. I believe the speed of decision-making and the flow of information are going to be what allows us to be nimble and agile. Those are the two ingredients we have to have.
Yeah.
So from a flow of information perspective, we have weekly meetings. I report to the head of the U.S. His team gets together once a week. Our leadership team then gets together once a week. And then each of the divisional sales leaders gets together with their team once a week. So that flow of information, whether it's cascading down or it's pushing up, is constant.
Gotcha. So let's just talk about one point that you just made, because I think it's really important around bureaucracy, is quick decisions, okay, and flow of information. Just unpack that a little bit, because if you think about our listeners right now, where organizations obviously get held up is decisions don't get made, it frustrates people, right? Walk me through how you're able to accomplish that, especially in a large organization.
Sure. Well, and you can have a scenario where decisions get made, but the information doesn't flow.
Love it.
So they go hand in hand. It's critical that you do both.
So at the end of the day, your belief is, number one, obviously quick decisions, but make sure you're sharing information. Because I always think that communication is truly the lifeblood of an organization. The better you communicate, the better people are informed. And what I've learned is it's not natural to people. You think it would be, right? And there's certain groups that it's just not natural, and so you do need to create systems, right?
Structure to it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Communication is one of the tenets of leadership. You cannot read a leadership book that does not have communication in it.
Right.
So you have to be very deliberate with it. So we'll have those weekly team calls. We'll have scheduled one-on-one calls. I think it's important to have the 2 up, 2 down scenario where I should be communicating with individuals 2 layers above me on the org system, 2 layers below, and vice versa. That just ensures alignment.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that, especially as if you think about this podcast, and you're going to have a lot of people that are one salesperson at a firm, right? You have 260 people just in your team alone. But the concept of communication and setting expectations and reporting progress against a plan, could you just unpack that if you're consulting with a one-person sales organization, that they, do you believe they should have the same process and procedures mentally as a 260-person firm?
Sure, because they have the same goals. So our communication, what we ask our team is what we call, let's start off with a FAST update. Flows, activity, segmentation, training. I want to know what we're doing on those. So it's a 1-person organization. It's a 10-person organization. It's a 200-person organization. Do they care about the flows, the financials of the business? Do you care about the activity? Segmentation, are you calling on the right clients? And then training, or you can use technical proficiency. Are you getting better every day? We want to start each call off with that. And then we can open up.
Love that. So one, it reeks of focus on what matters most, right? Number one, that's one of our core tenets is focus on what matters most, and clarity of process. You just went through your 4 things, and you ripped it off in 3 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. So it's complete clarity of your process, right? And what matters most.
Yes.
Love that. Okay. So as we're talking and our listeners are trying to figure out, because I always think that when you're in an organization that you want to be, from a distribution perspective, as a salesperson, however you want to think of it, you want to be the dog and not the tail. So many people, unfortunately, make themselves the tail because they don't create a sales plan and then get buy-in from senior leadership into what good looks like, mm-hmm. and then a regular reporting cadence against the plan. And what I'm hearing from you is you address all of that up front, so you are the dog, and then you're reporting up, right, and not being...
I had the pleasure of meeting with our CEO, Jenny Johnson, last week. I had one question for her. Jenny, what are your 3 priorities? That's all. That's why I wanted to know.
Did she rip them off?
She ripped them off.
I love that. That's great. All right, so now we're going to dovetail into what I would consider to be my favorite topic on this. There's a lot of favorite topics when I get to leadership, but I'm a CRM nerd. I'm a Salesforce geek. You're like going out of style. As you know, as a subscriber to Dakota Marketplace, we're built on Salesforce. And I know you guys use Salesforce, right? So walk me through the importance of a CRM. And this is such a key question for you, for all of the listeners, on what a CRM means to you as a distribution leader.
We transition. We use Microsoft.
Oh, you do? Okay. Sorry, last time we spoke.
That's okay.
Yeah.
A CRM should be a financial asset to a company. If someone's coming in to buy your company, one of the things that they should look at is the CRM and say, that is an asset. It should be the brains to the organization to a degree, really, where you memorialize what's happening. So we went through the segmentation. That is so important. And then you have an organization that's larger like ours. We employ a generalist practitioner specialist model within our distribution. We want to make sure that we can customize and meet the client where they are. So we have an alternatives team. We have custom indexing. We have ETFs. We own over a dozen different autonomous investment firms. So there's not one person that's going to have the ability, just like a doctor, to be an expert on everything. So we've got to leverage the specialist with the generalist practitioner, and the main hub for that has to be the CRM system. You take from Jeff Bezos at Amazon, his COO came out and said, we want our people to be able to run autonomously, parallel to one another, quickly, and communicate through technology. The bureaucracy comes in when I have to pick up the phone to call you, or you have to pick up the phone to call me to understand what's going on with the client, where if we have a CRM system where we're both using it, we're both out hustling, and we can look in and all the details are there, we're running parallel, autonomously, quickly, and still in communication. And that's what the CRM really allows us to do.
That's amazing. So I haven't heard it described like that, but I really love what you're saying. So if it doesn't go in the CRM, as we talked about earlier, it doesn't count. So unpack that a little bit around, because I've never had an issue with buy-in, right? Just because it runs our business. It always has, since we started in 2006. But talk to me about how people generally, how your sales team generally utilizes it, and what's most important to get into the CRM.
If it's not recorded, it did not happen. And that's as we say it. And as I mentioned, I carried the bag for over 15 years. And one of my least favorite things to do, probably the 2 least favorite things to do, is entering into the CRM and doing your expenses.
Right.
Any salesperson wants to be out hunting and not spending time doing that. But it makes your life so much more efficient when next time you see the client and you understand, okay, Jonathan has a 16-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son and lives here and is doing, these are the things they care about. And this is what we spoke about. That, number one, is the most important part. And it does allow us to understand what the team is doing as well. And then within our organization, as I mentioned, with the generalist specialist model, and it's not just us, it's anyone within the organization that can go in and understand what's happening with the client.
As I keep mentioning, there's different people listening to this podcast. if you were consulting to a salesperson, a smaller firm might have a couple salespeople, what have you, could be a private equity firm that just has one or two, biz dev people, IR people, however you want to say it. What advice would you give to them around utilizing a CRM, even as a small firm?
I have a tough time understanding why you would not want to use a CRM. Why would you not want to memorialize what matters to the client? We finished this conversation, and it's an important conversation. We went through a discovery. So our meeting process is centered around 4 things: the relationship, discovery, application, and territory management. That's why we want our salespeople, every meeting, spending time. Are you advancing the relationship, understanding it? Are you asking the right questions? Did you discover anything about that person's business? What application did you provide to their capital market thesis? And then your territory management. Did you ask for any referrals? Did you get any? Did you schedule your next appointment? Every one of those 4 things should live in the CRM system, whether you're a 1-person shop or a 200-person shop. It's almost troubling people don't see the value in recording that and memorializing it.
So the reason I delve so deeply into the question is because my philosophy has, for every single salesperson globally, should look at themselves as Gui Costin Inc. And you should operate that 1-person sales group, okay, as your own company, as your own, right, and have all of the most sophisticated processes of a big organization. Leverage technology in every way that you can, because when I look at it, one of the key aspects, and you're doing recall, right? And you recall, but there's also all the meetings that you've done. And being able to look back in the last 100 meetings, you've done 200 meetings, it's going to trigger sales actions. You can't get that out of an Excel spreadsheet or of a yellow pad of paper or anything like that, right? To be able to go in and trigger sales actions on your past activity is vital to leverage of a salesperson.
How often do you have a moment where you go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it's been 6 months since we last saw each other. It felt like it was 2 months ago.
All right, I'll give you that, right? So we're calling on Merrill Lynch, home office. I'm like in the 8th year sales cycle from 06. And I looked at our sales team mate and I said, hey, when's the last time we met with Yvonne from Merrill Lynch? And he goes, this is April. He goes, in November. I said, it's like a long pause. I said, November, it's 2015. We're April 2015. And I said, November of 2014? He goes, yep. So do me a favor. So he goes, I said, check that. He pulls up Salesforce, goes in. He goes, oh, November of 2013.
And then you add COVID, the pandemic, and time really does blur. We live in an age of technology. You have the ability to talk about creating leverage, creating scale within yourself.
Yes.
Technology allows us to do that.
Well, this is, I'm just so happy you unpacked it to that level of depth, because that's really what I wanted to bring out in this conversation is I just think it's so important. If I could wave my magic wand, I'd have everybody in our community that's in a fundraising role absolutely have the CRM run their life.
If you think about it this way, we talked about this as being a financial asset to a company and ways to measure and understand what's happening and memorialize what's happened. Think about it from the client perspective. Isn't that where we should start?
Right.
So if we start from the client and we're client-centric, and if I'm the client and you come in and you don't know when you last saw me, you don't know what we talked about, someone else comes in, one of the specialists comes in, and it doesn't look like you and the specialist had any communication. How do I feel as a client?
Right. So well said.
So just take it from the client perspective. Forget everything else. That's what's going to allow you to be better at your job.
Right. So really what you're getting at is you're disrespecting the client to a large degree. I would say if you send an email without a clear call to action for a meeting, you're actually disrespecting the person because you're making them do all the work.
And we all talk about time being our only finite resource.
Right.
That person is giving you their time.
I love that. Okay. So moving on to leadership. Okay. And I know this is near and dear to your heart. In fact, I want you all to know, Jonathan was kind enough to send over this unbelievable sort of printout of his leadership philosophies, which I love because we have it written out ourselves as well. And we call them Dakotisms. So could you just start to talk about what leadership means to you? And then that's going to turn into a question about culture, et cetera. So I'll let you go on.
There's a lot to unpack here. Leadership begins with self-awareness. That's the first thing. So to be self-aware and understand. So if you're new into the business or long tenured, whether you're doing a caliper or MBTI, or there's a great book called Strength Finders 2.0. It's very simple. Understand yourself and what your leadership traits are, because everyone is different. There's different ways to be a leader. So for me, it's really about finding what's unique about that individual and pulling that strength out. That's what we all have a superpower of some part. That's what I aim to do. But leadership overall, number one, sets the example. That's the first and foremost. Leadership sets the example. You cannot ask someone to do something you're not willing to do. You have to set the pace. You have to set the tone. I mentioned it begins with self-awareness. I think leadership first presents itself when you're willing to be vulnerable, and then you have to be adaptable to have it survive. Leadership has to foster an environment of communication and trust. And at the end of the day, leadership is all about service for the greater good. If you think leadership is for yourself, you will fail.
Gotcha. So talk to me about leadership and culture and how you treat people. Because I really think at the end of the day, we can talk about culture all we want, but we have to live it.
Sure.
Right. And it all comes down to how you treat people. So tell me, how does that manifest itself in a 260-person team that you're on?
We talk about culture a lot, and culture is one of these I call fuzzy words. What do you mean by culture? Right? You're interviewing someone, they're looking for a great culture. What do you mean by culture? I've been fortunate to have two definitions of culture presented itself to me. Number one is the lowest standard you're willing to accept will define your culture. That's a standards-based, performance-based culture. The other one, though, is the root meaning of culture. The root meaning of culture is the word care. You can come to work and be your authentic self. I care about you as a teammate. Now, if I go back to the standards-based culture, all you do, because it doesn't really, when I say the lowest standard you're willing to accept is going to define your culture, that doesn't really feel, maybe it feels a little cold.
Right.
It's performance-based. If that's all you do become toxic as a culture. On the flip side, if all you do is care and you don't have standards, you're going to become bankrupt. So what we will look at as culture equals standards plus care. We want to hold each other accountable. We want iron to sharpen iron in the organization, but we also want people to come in and be their authentic self and care for one another. And I think having standards is caring for one another. And so if we can all rally around that same definition, doesn't matter how large the organization is.
So I was on a Zoom call about a year ago, business school kind of thing. This conversation came up, and one guy happened to mention, I got a lot of value out of my coaches yelling at me, right? Like Bobby Knight type yelling, right? And I couldn't help having, for me, 65 teammates, right, as a CEO. And I said, dude, you're playing with fire. He goes, yeah, I don't know why that's not acceptable. Because I think at the end of the day, being, yelled at or whatever. And I said, do you understand you're dealing with human beings who are spending the majority of their time of their lives with their coworkers? And it's how you treat them. They go home. It's how they, how their day was with their kids, their wife, everything like that. This is not like a fun, you just can't be willy-nilly with how you treat people, right? Now, maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, definitely 40, 50 years ago, there just was as much care, right? Because but today, right? People are going home and you think that it's just permissible. You really recommend having a Bobby Knight approach to leadership and culture. And I said, you're playing with people's lives every day.
Well, you can't get through life without being humble. That's, I think, the one shared human experience is that we all go through a period, something happens, something's happening in your life. And if I know you care about me during that period, I'm going to run through a wall for you. When that recruiter calls me, I'm not going to take the call. Because when I needed someone the most, I knew you cared. So it doesn't mean you have to be lax on someone.
No.
It just, that the person's there for you when you need them.
100%.
Advice I would ever give to another sales leader, which I've spoken with other sales leaders about this, is you have to treat the security guard that you're walking in to this office today the exact same way you treat the CEO inside the building. Treat everyone with respect. I think respect is something you give quickly and you earn it slowly.
Yeah.
But treat everyone that way.
That's so well said. So talk to me then, next question I have for you, because it dovetails perfectly. What advice would you give a young salesperson entering the investment industry today?
It's a good one. Can I give a couple?
100%.
Okay. 3 things if they do. If they show up, if they give their best effort, and they get out of their comfort zone. They do those 3 things, they're going to be successful. Sounds simple.
Yeah.
But it's not. So just show up. And when you show up, give it your best. And once you give it your best, stretch yourself. Get out of the comfort zone. And just keep that in mind. Now, I think that the foundation to those three things, or the foundation, and even an accelerator, would be two additional things. One, I would tell them be brave. And second, I would tell them to focus on their strengths.
Right. And be brave. We'll unpack that a little bit.
So the reason I say be brave is you don't always want to show up. There are times maybe you're nervous to show up. Maybe you don't want to get on that podium. Maybe you had a rough day, and it takes you being brave to show up. Sometimes giving your best effort in front of your peers. So let's see, we're doing peer-to-peer presentations, and you've got to give your best effort. That takes being brave. And then all of them, getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to fail, and that takes being brave.
Yeah. And so you said, focus on your strengths. I like that one. Talk to me about that for a young salesperson.
Sure. So everything I just walked through, I'm a Philadelphia 76ers fan. We're here in Philadelphia. Joel Embiid's on the sidelines right now. If I showed up at 76ers practice and I said, I want to be the center, I'm going to show up today, I'm going to give my best effort, and I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. How successful do you think I'll be on the 76ers?
Right.
No, it's not my strength. I'm
Right.
not meant to be a center in the NBA. So you can go through all that, but if you're going against the grain of your DNA, you're going against what you are best at, you're just going to be pushing water up the hill. I think you'll hear people say, make your weaknesses better. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if you have the ability to delegate your weaknesses, if you have the ability to put processes, structure around your weaknesses so you can manage those, and then maximize your strengths. I'm mentioning, what is it that makes you, you?
Yeah.
What are you best at? And if you put your effort into that, and that's why I said being brave and focusing on your strengths, if you take those as your foundation and as an accelerator to those three, is show up, give your best effort, get out of your comfort zone, and you're being brave and you're using your strengths, you're going to succeed.
I love that. Normally, I don't answer the question, but you just made me think of something. If I could give advice to a young person in sales, in business, I'd say, get over yourself. If I could do it again, I would have outsourced everything I possibly could that I wasn't good at and only focused on that. It took me so long to embrace basically outsourcing activities. And the ego can get in the way. Oh no, I can do it. I should be doing this. I read a book. If you can't do it, if you can't, it's got done right, do it yourself and all that stuff. And it's like, if I knew what I know now, I would have done so much more of that outsourcing. Right. So last question. Dynamic world always. It's a dynamic world every day, right? It's never stopping, never changing, or it's ever changing. Talk to me about obstacles, like kind of the biggest obstacle you're facing as a distribution leader today.
It's got to be almost the same for everyone. You mentioned there's some consistency. It's focus. And I would say focus in that the industry, we always say the industry is changing and it's changing rapidly. I think in the last 4 years, you've seen so much disruption, not just from the pandemic, but just in the industry. Passive disrupts active. Direct indexing disrupts passive. Private is disrupting public. There's constant movement, and right now it's accelerating. So how can we stay focused on the client needs, our strategic initiatives, in a world that is just changing by the day? And it really is. I would say I am starting in the mid to late 90s to 2010, 40 Act mutual funds were the way of the world.
Right.
It's not the case today. So that would just be maintaining that focus, making sure that we're staying centered on the client's needs. Our strategic initiatives are aligned with it. That's the obstacle.
What you're getting at is the obstacle is lack of focus, because there's so much stuff out there, right? And so the discipline to stay focused with all the sort of noise.
Sure. You've got to pick your spots. I'm saying put more wood behind fewer arrows. Where you're going to have the biggest impact, it's very easy to, what's this firm doing over here? What's happening over here? Franklin Templeton, as I mentioned, we come with customized solutions across the board. I mentioned alternatives. I mentioned direct indexing. I mentioned ETFs, 40 Act funds, SMAs. We offer those solutions. So that's where I say for us, and I think for anyone, how to stay focused and execute. But all of those things that I just went through ultimately lead back to what the client needs and what the client wants.
Right.
So it's just getting back to that center of gravity.
Love it. Well, Jonathan, you've shared so many amazing insights around leadership, culture, technology, CRM, everything. I can't thank you enough. The insights have been tremendous.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I love having you on. So that's a wrap for another Rainmaker podcast. Jonathan, thanks so much for being on, and I can't wait to see you on the next Rainmaker podcast.
You can find this episode and others on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast platform. We are also available on YouTube if you prefer to watch while you listen. If you would like to check up on past episodes, check out our website, dakota.com. Finally, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, please be sure to like, follow, and share these episodes. We welcome all your feedback as well. Thank you for investing your time with Dakota.
Hey, thanks so much for joining Rainmaker Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the show, enjoyed the interview. I know I loved it. And hey, if you wake up in the morning and you raise money for an investment firm, you do cold outreach, whether you're a sales leader or salesperson, and you don't know about Dakota Marketplace, we would love to show it to you. It's world-class. It's used by over 880 investment firms and over 3,600 individual salespeople. To learn more, go to dakota.com and click on a free trial.